good afternoon to each one of you. On behalf of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, we welcome you all for this exclusive session on managing occupational health and safety systemic approach. The session is organized under the aegis of Manufacturing Expert Committee of the Chamber. The committee is led by Mr. Prakash Ji, who is the Vice President Technical Taido Kirloskar Auto Parts, co-chaired by Mr. Shivaganesh, Head Sales and Applications FANUC India, and mentored by Dr. Devarajan, Senior Vice President Production Engineering, TVS Motor Company. I acknowledge the presence of all the leaders of the expert committee. On behalf of the Chamber, we express our sincere thanks to Mr. G. Venkat Kuppuswamy, who is here to address the session. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. I'll just briefly introduce Mr. Venkat Kuppuswamy, who is the General Manager, Key Accounts of Lloyd's Registered Quality Assurance. He comes over with more than 29 years of experience in the field of quality, environment, and safety. He is also an assessor conformance and compliance for a wide range of industry sectors that include construction, business and management consultancy, project management, automobile, manufacturing in various sectors. With Lloyd's Registered Quality Assurance, he is there since 1999 and responsible for organizations like SKF, Toyota, L&T, Honeywell, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and many others. He has assessed and trained organizations on quality, environmental, energy, and work safety performance improvements for more than 2 decades. Prior to joining Lloyd's Register, he was heading three divisions of TVS Group of Quality at Madurai. He is also on board of various institutions, organizations, and he is also a IRCA registered lead auditor. Thank you very much, sir, and we welcome you for this session, sir, once again. Um,
Thank you.
I now hand over the platform to you, sir. Over to
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rupa, for giving a nice introduction. Let me, on behalf of BCIC, Bangalore Chamber of Commerce and Industries, uh, thank for giving this opportunity to express on managing occupational health and safety topic today. My screen is visible to you all.
Yes, sir, it
My,
is
my
visible, sir.
screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. There cannot be any appropriate time than this, to talk about on health and safety, especially after the pandemic. When the pandemic has struck us, everyone has started realizing the importance of health. Everyone has understood what safety means. The people have understood that they cannot step out the house without having a minimum PPE requirements also for that sake. And they also learned a basic hygiene, which was not the case earlier. So that is one of the good things this pandemic has taught us. Similarly, if you just look into it, any pandemic or any destruction thing which happens globally across, it leaves traces of something to be learned. For that matter, if you look at the First World War, after it got over, the product standardization evolved. And similarly, this pandemic has left us a new style of living, and health and safety has become a major concern for all of us. So under these circumstances, me talking about the health and safety becomes a little much easier for me in expressing why the need of this requirement need out to be at the workplace, be it at a workplace or be it at a domestic area or so. That will be talked about, and then the overview of the requirements and the benefits of it we'll be sharing with. And quite a time will be spent on risk management. What's called a risk, what's called a hazard in first place, and what is risk, and what is the risk management needed to be done, how a risk management needed to be done, how an assessment needed to be made, risk assessment, and how a risk evaluation needed to be taken through also. And the importance of leadership and the worker participation, which is much more a core element. A lot of emphasis has been nowadays being given, that we will be talking. And then implementation of the best practices. Of course, for academic interest, we'll be talking about the specifications on standards which was there, like OSHA's 18001 and the new standard which has got evolved. That we'll be discussing it also. And for those people who are saying that I'm already been certified for under certain scheme, how I need to migrate even. The topic why I chose is like a systemic approach. The word systemic approach being given is, if I'm going to talk about a subject on any subject for that sake, I cannot talk my own thing, like in the sense. So the people need have to accept and they need have to imbibe certain requirements. So under these circumstances, I took the reference of a standard as one of the element that would supplement my presentation to you, and thereby you can also relate it to your work environment and then go about the need for ISO, I mean, what to call need for occupational health and safety, we'll see about, and then we'll talk about the need for a standard even. Everyone know about in 1989, if I remember right, the famous or the disaster which happened in the mid-sea of Valdez and the Exxon, that the explosion of the ship, which oil tanker, which had let out close to 11 million gallon of the oil into the sea. That impact is still felt 30 years after that, 32 years after that. The impact is still left, and still the mopping up of activity is being carried out. And if you look at it, what are the impacts does it as it left behind? In the sense, it has really made an imbalance to the marine ecosystem, for that matter. Several fisheries, many things, may not call the ecosystem of the marine sector got a severe impact. Of course, it has lost the reputation of the organization, the brand image of the organization was lost. And of course, the legal cost did matter much. But more than the legal cost, the mopping up cost is still happening. Like in the sense, the mopping up cost will be much higher than the legal cost even. Of course, the business interruptions, cost of inventory, and the tank replacement cost. These are some of the other costs which the organization had to undergo. And this provoked the entire community that there has to be a safety management system. There has to be to reduce the risk of loss need out to be the need of the hour. They started thinking, and with adequate risk control measures, this impact can be minimized. That's what is the entirety of that entire event. Outcome of the event did take place. We normally use the word risk very commonly in our day-to-day activities of talk, but many people do talk about that terminology without understanding what risk means. So in next few minutes, we'll talk about what a risk management is about and how I need to be assessed and how it need have to be evaluated also. Prior to that, we need have to know about what is called a hazard. Hazard, by simple definition, it talks about a source or a situation that lead to a potential harm to a human, maybe injury or ill health, or it could be a combination of all these things. But nevertheless, it never stops there. Now, it even talks about not only the injury and ill health, it also talks about the emotional well being of a person. I'm not going to talk about much about the emotional well-being of a person, which is also an occupational health and safety issue, because that requires a separate platform for me to address, because that's such a wide topic about the stress-related events and how the emotional well-being. But for academic interest, I would like you all to know about that it is also encompasses occupational health and safety encompasses with about the emotional well-being of the people, because the emotional well-being of the people do contribute to a great extent of his behavior in the shop floor that cannot be forgotten or that cannot be easily erased off. That need also need to lay a greater stress. But we will now restrict ourselves to the scope of a discussion of what is a hazard. Hazard is a source of a situation, I've told you also, that may lead to a potential injury. It could be in form of a fire, it could be in form of an explosion, it could be a form of a cut injury, could be a fall or a trip or electric shock, whatever it may be. So this is what is the hazard is being classified. Then what is called a risk? Yes, I know a source of a situation does cost and harm to me, but what is a risk? Risk is, in a simple terms, if you want to remember, is a combination of two factors. One is the severity of what is that, of a cut or a fall or a trip, whatever we had seen, and the likelihood of its occurrence. The combination of these, the multiplication of these two factors do contribute what is called a risk. And why a risk need have to be assessed? That will be the next question which will be occurring in you. Like, yes, in my organization, I've got a sequence of activities. There's a lot of process flows are there. And every process flow, there is every possibility or a potential hazard do occur. Should I have to identify, of course, I have to identify all hazards. There's no choice actually. But should I have to pool my resources to all those hazards? There comes the question, if I have to pool all my resources in terms of money, efforts, competency of the people into all the hazards, then you may find dearth of resources within your team. So the risk assessment will enable you to prioritize which risk has been very high, so that this is a high risk in my process performance. So I will pool all my existing resources towards that, so that the occurrence of that activity can be minimized. Please, what do you call, keep it in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the severity you cannot eliminate. The only thing you can reduce by having a good management system or a control in place is by means of reducing the occurrence, by means of a good system in place, could be in form of operational controls, could be in form of competent people on the job, could be a good measurement and monitoring techniques, or it could be by means of procedures or systems in place, so that the occurrence can be minimized. These are some of the ways that you can minimize the occurrence, but the severity would remain as such. To tell you a small example, which when you drive down, when if I have to drive down to the highway, the risk, the potential severity for me is I can be hit by a bicycle. I mean, I can be hit by a truck, could be anything. So the severity could be, I would just come out of bruises also, could be I may require a first aid, or I may be require hospitalization. These three events are all reversible events. Like I can bring back, I'll be getting back to my normal state. But whereas if I lose my limbs or something like that, that's irreversible. There's another form of a severity, or not to be seen is the highest form of severity there. So under these circumstances of severity, you cannot eliminate it. As far as that would prevail, if I'm going to drive down my vehicle onto the roads, onto the highways, or any road for that maybe. But what I can minimize it, I can minimize that occurrence by means of having a competent driver with me. Could be having not a hatchback vehicle, could be having a good vehicle, a high chassis vehicle, or I can just give the vehicle for maintenance at periodic intervals. I can wear my seat belt, so that the occurrence of the severity part of it can be minimized by means of an occurrence part of it. I'm trying to minimize that the severity grade. So this is one of the example I could talk about how a risk assessment can be done, how you can mitigate, and how you can bring it to a instant that you can bear. Of course, there are certain terminologies which I never wanted to spell out, like a risk appetite and other things that we shall talk about as we get matured in our discussion for that sake. A classic example is the source or situation is machine not guarded. And what is the, I mean, severity? A person, a man has lost his, cut his fingers. That's the severity for that sake. And what is the controls can be in place? The controls could be in form of a guard, machine guard. Machine guard is a Factories Act requirement that you need have to all have to follow it. There's one of this requirement that need have to be followed. This is one of the example which you can think about. Uh, then how do you identify the risk? Now you're talking about so much now for the last 5, 7 minutes you have been talking about, but how do I identify those risks? The risk can be identified by means of their experience or the best practices. One is a way of doing it. Another way of doing it is by studying the accidents and the near misses which has happened in your area. That could be another way of doing it. But the one which is recommended is a very formal techniques which you need to follow. What are the formal techniques is one of the basic technique, which is not a hi-fi. I'm just telling you, when you walk inside your organization, you know the sequence of processes you got. Say for that matter, if a foundry, if you just take it, a foundry has got receipt of a raw materials, like in the form of a scrap. Then they've got the melting operations. Then they've got a fettling, we call molding operations. Then fettling, pouring and teaming operations, fettling operation, and then they do a heat treatment. So these are some of the sequence of activities which they have got. So identify what are the sources of hazard in every processes, thereby you will not be missing any hazard for that sake. So identify the hazards in every processes, and then try to evaluate the risk associated with that with the current controls what you have. Then the potential occurrence can be graded or classified as such. So that is what is the means of a risk assessment which you can do. This is on the right hand side of my slide. You can see a triangle which many people would be very familiar with, that it is called as a Heinrich triangle. And what so I'm not talking about the Heinrich triangle in terms of the number of events or whatever it is. I'm not going to tell about any numericals over there, but I would say there are unsafe conditions and unsafe acts do occur in an organization in form of a dangerous situation. That's what it is at the base of the pyramid it is. And that gets narrowed down if it's not been attended on to. It occurs in form of a near miss. near miss or a close calls or a dangerous occurrences, all these are the ones are the form of a near misses. So the near miss, if that has not been attended on to, can lead to an injury. Instance of injuries like first aid or hospitalization, it can lead to. If that is also been ignored, then the organization may face a situation of a fatality. For that matter, if any fatality happens in an organization, the entire reputation of the organization been brought down to the ground. Like there are many what you call media waiting for such whatever is happening, and the media people will be the first people before the stakeholder could arrive at that location to publish it, and the occupier will be in a deeper trouble, and the mental agony you go through. That is what it is. Apart from the brand reputation, of course, in the first slide we saw about what are all the impacts it does create if such an accident happens. So that is what it is. Like, secondly, this slide I just want to tell about. I'll tell my latest experience about a few months back. I was in an organization walking through. Of course, it's not for occupational health and safety, but occupational health and safety has been so ingrained into my thoughts, like the safety, because our policy is to look for the safety of people with whomever we are interacting with. So when I was walking through the shop floor, I could find a person ripped open, was doing a major overhaul of equipment. In this case, it was welding equipment. He was doing a major overhaul, and with a plug connected onto the source without isolating it. There is no isolation, there is no lockout, tagout, nothing was done, and he was operating on that. I went close to him because I could not hold myself. I went close to him, asked him, "You're not isolated it. You know what is the consequence?" That guy looked at me, gave a wry smile at me, and then told, "Do you know, sir, I'm a licensed uh, operator. I'm a licensed electrician," he told. I had to tell him the power doesn't know whether you are licensed electrician or not. The fatality, whatever would happen, the severity remains the same even if you're licensed or not licensed. Even better, isolate it and start working about it. Because the people never realize, for that matter, like they have got their own conviction and their own belief that they are very safe and others are not safe. People do not realize that 15 to 20 milliamps of a current, not high, I'm not talking about a very high order, 15 to 20 milliamps of a current can give rise to a respiratory failure. And 20 milliamps, 20 to 30 milliamps can give a ventricular fibrillation also. That's the reason in any of the organization, if you go for high voltage or whatever it is there, they mandate that Indian Electricity Regulatory Board mandates that a person who is there should know about how they can do a resuscitation of the heart and other things. People need have to be trained on that because it may lead to such a situation if a person is exposed. Another thing which very interesting is many people think I've got a very good reflex, and my reflex is so very high. So my body is very agile. But they forget that it takes zero point 0.2 seconds for you to react. That zero point 0.2 seconds, if you are working at a height, in zero point 0.2 seconds, you fall over 2 meters. That's 6.5 feet. Instances of a death from 1.5 meter height also has been reported, and you can find it very widely. So these are some of the factual things which people tend to forget. In many of the organizations, when you walk across and then you see quality, they would have put the word quality, and then who's responsible for quality. They put a convex mirror on the top of it or a mirror over it, so that a fellow who goes there can has to see and realize himself that is it is you are responsible for quality. But at the same time, the safety should also be put the same way, and you are the core of it. Like it's in your hands. Like you are responsible for yourself, to your family, and to the organization to which you are accountable for also. So that is the place that people do forget about their responsibility and about their contribution towards health and safety. Talking about the risk management, any management, if you just look into it, I would say it starts with a plan, do, check, act cycle. That's what it is. So if I had to do a risk assessment, then it should start with the identification process. That's what I sometime back I told what are the hazards associated with the processes, and towards that, what is the current controls I've got, and the current controls against which the occurrence would be determined. And I have to do a risk analysis and I do a risk evaluation. Then I have to treat the risk. And because if the risk which I've identified, who's identifying it? You are identifying it, and you are grading it, and you are evaluating it, and you are giving certain numbers of a high, low, or a critical, high, medium, or some of the grades which you are giving. And when you are telling it is critical, and you have to attend on to it before starting the work for that sake. If the risk level you have identified as low, okay, fine, that because your controls are good enough that it will not lead to irreversible kind of situation which I was talking about a few minutes back. So a risk treatment is much more essential, and it is to be communicated and consulted, and you have to have a monitoring and review. That's what is very important. At this juncture, when I talk about the communication, I would like to share my own experience about Rupa was explaining. I'm 29 years of experience I've got. Exactly 29 years back, if I rewind my first job, I was associated with TVS DuPont. I was associated with DuPont. You know, DuPont is known for what? DuPont, more than for the product what they manufacture, they are well known for quality. Sorry, for safety. So my first job when I was there, I had to give my credentials to HR, and then the HR person told, "Why don't you photocopy this?" Because it's a very thin organization, of course, totally all put together. I mean, I'm talking about 29 years back, 28 years back to be precise, 29. Yeah, I mean that is was the time only 17 people were working in the organization, including the gardeners also. And that time itself, the turnover was around 19 crores of. I mean, I would call that's what it is. But turnover per employee was close to a crore of rupees. So I was trying to take the photocopy in the photocopying machine, and the second copy when I had to take it got stuck. And having given the project works and all I have done during my college days, then naturally the mentality is when the paper got stuck, I had to lift the garage. I just switched on. I pushed the lever, pulled out the machine to take out the paper which got stuck. The boy who was going around, the tea boy who was to that time he was moving around from the canteen, a canteen person, he pushed me across. And I had to look at him, and why is he pushing me? I was just looking at him, and he told, "Sir, you're not isolated the switch." And he turned off the switch and he told, "This is what it is." And then later I learned, I was as an youngster at that point in time, I was very much agitated to see who is this guy to push me, and what how dare he is pushing me from this. That is, then later after a couple of hours I learned the communication has been very clear to the person at the last level in the organization, that they should care for the people with whom they are interacting with. Secondly, that there is no first aid cases need have to be reported. There should not be a no loss of time due to incidents and accidents. And that's what very much has crept in his mind. And he never bothers whether it is a senior or a high level person, whoever it is or whoever is there. His job is to see that an unsafe act is being conducted, and his job is to prevent that. And that's what is the communication importance is. And that is the first learning in my life, in my first day of my job. That is what is known for the effectiveness of the communication. The people should understand the objectives, and that should be reflected in their daily core of activities also. Okay, that's the risk management process. And this is a simple format for you to understand, like what is the element of an activity I told a few minutes back. Like you have to identify all the processes, and against all the processes, the relevant hazards associated with that. What can go wrong? And what will be its consequence, and what is its likelihood? Or whenever you put the likelihood, the number, you should always relate it with the current controls what you've got, and the consequence into likelihood is what's the risk level which you need to identify. A simple one in a case of a tube rupture, if you just look into it, I mean, corrosion from fluids, so the shell side is the cause of a failure. The hydrocarbon at high pressure can, I mean, than the cooling water. So as a result of which the frequency has happened twice in 10 years. So it is critical, could cause a major fire, and that's what the classification is. And it is ranked accordingly with respect to its frequency and impact. This is just to give an example of, to give you a feel about how a risk assessment is done. This is very important. If you just look into it, I've already explained what is this. This consequence is in the y-axis, and the x-axis is the likelihood. And I'm just telling you, I'm just advocating it, you gentlemen. I'm not recommending it strongly. This is the way you should have. But for the sake of a discussion, for sake of understanding, I'm just bringing this slide to you to give you a fair idea about how a risk evaluation matrix will be like. What is insignificant, I told you, which requires 2 3 hours, a nausea feeling, a headache, which I was mentioning it to you, that is insignificant. And the minor, yes, I'm not available for work, it requires a first aid, is a minor, maybe for 3 4 hours I am not available for work. Moderate, which requires hospitalization, could be a form of a reportable injury also as per the Factories Act. I'm not available for work for more than 72 hours. But all these three cases, I could say those are all reversible. The major and the catastrophic I mentioned you are irreversible. So major and what do you call, and the catastrophic fall in this region, the major, sorry, the moderate falls in this region, and the minor and the insignificant. This is what it is. But here, here I have made it a little more clear with respect to, because this is very subjective. These terminologies are subjective, but I have made a subjective to be very much objective in terms of rating by means of telling first aid to blah blah blah, which I was mentioning you a while back. In the case of likelihood, also you should be very very specific. What is rare did not happen for the last 10 years, did happen for 10 years. I mean, I would call less than 10 years, but less than, I mean, more than 5 years, unlikely. So possible, less than 3 years, sorry, more than 3 years, less than 5 years, some continuous class intervals. And then it happens every year or in every month for that matter, you can keep it as certain. So you have to be very clear in expressing the criteria needed to be very clearly given, so that when the team of people evaluate the risk, they'll be all be giving right numbers to that. Now, I'm just telling you about an important element of the control measures. This is the hierarchy of the control measures. What is the hierarchy of control? It starts with elimination. The first hierarchy of control by substitution, by means of engineering controls. Administrative controls is the fourth line of defense. And the last line of defense, the fifth line of defense, is the PP. Many people have got a wrong insight that whenever any hazard they have identified of a high order, they put the PP as the first. That's not the right approach. PP is the last line of approach, last line of defense, and you should be very cautious about it. We will take one example by this slide itself and try to explain. A person who is coming with a grinding handheld grinding machine, like in the sense, for that matter, handheld grinding machine, he's carrying it to the organization and he's doing a grinding job. So the first inspection of the equipment was done. It was seen that the integrity of the harness, wiring harness, were exposed. That is open. That means there is every likelihood of a shock hazard is very much prevalent in that situation. Another one which they found, the source where he is connecting onto the plug doesn't have a earthing. So that means the earthing is improper. So under these circumstances, it has been rated as 21. Just imagine it is rated as 21, which is a major risk type of a one, which should not be carried out in an organization till it is made as low as practicable. That's what it is possible. So that the one, then they, what they did, okay, the safety inspections done, the tagging of equipment is done, the training has been given to the person according to the policy or whatsoever it is, and then they're bringing it to 18. Even then also, it's not very comfortable. They put RCBs over it so that if any event of anything happens, the person is safe. The fuse is getting blown off for that sake, so that the safety of the person is taken care of. So by doing that, they are bringing it to the level 10. Then, even then, the people look at it and then say, hey, look here, this still, I want to make it a little more, the risk appetite of the organization is much more lower, like in the sense they want to bring it much more down. So they are bringing a battery operated grinders instead of connecting it to a source. So thereby, they are bringing it somewhere around 5. So what is now administrative control, what is engineering control, what is administrative control, and what is the type of a PPE also for that matter, which would reduce in the injury, the severity levels it can bring down for that sake. So that is, severity level cannot be brought down. I mean to say the occurrence to that severity can be brought down. That's what is the one which I would like to emphasize. So this is something which I would like to share with you all to understand how you can treat risk which you are classifying it as major or catastrophic. It is to be treated, and then you have to allow the job to continue. This is a famous Swiss cheese model. This is something which I would like to, I love talking about it. We some time back I was telling that every organization have got an excellent procedures, operational controls, competent people. There are several lines of defenses. Like they've got a defense, they've got a barriers, they've got safeguards, everything they've got. Ideally, the situation in a, if you slice a cheese, ideally there should not be any holes like this. It should be that means the barriers are wonderful, the integrity of the barriers, the integrity of the controls, the integrity of all the emergency preparedness, and everything is in a very wonderful state of way it is. But does it exist? The word ideal doesn't exist at all. So yes, if you just look at any cheese, it has an inherent weakness. Every could be the defense mechanism, the barriers, the safeguards has got its inherent weakness, and that inherent weakness is represented in form of a hole. So when hazard strikes for that sake, and if it finds that weak spot, and it can just pass through it, and it can injure a person who's associated with the process. What are these holes are classified? The holes are like active failures. What are called active failures, the like slips, violation, human behavior, violation of the requirements. These are all the active failures. Then what are latent conditions? Latent conditions are insufficient training, inadequate staffing, the equipment is not at all in good shape for them to carry out the work. These are some of the things. Inadequate training also, I was saying, incompetent person for the job. These are the latent conditions. So these are the things which need out to be continuously seen and then reviewed by the team to see that the barriers which they are promoting as a barrier, real barrier, should act as a real barrier to see that the injury and ill health is being prevented. So all these things we are now talking, and thankfully, when health and we started about the Exxon Valdez Exxon ship event, and from there on till now, we never had a standard in place. Please note it. We never had a standard on occupational health and safety in place till the year 2018. There were specifications like occupation. First, it started with BS 8800 also. In fact, LRQA been an author for that BS 8800 also when the standard came in 1996. Not a standard. I mean, I'm very cautious in using the word a specification form. Later to which the people all joined together, all the bodies like us joined together, and then they accepted WOSHAS as a specification towards against which we'll try to evaluate an organization of those requirements would be. And later to which the people started realizing, yes, there has to be a standard which should be globally accepted. So the work started around 2013, and the year 2018 end, a 45,000 standard, 45,001 standard was published. And incidentally, any standard gets published needs 3 years of its implementation. So 2021 should be the year of, that all the people need out to adopt to if they want to go in for a certain scheme of certification, or they want to claim themselves that they are occupational health and safety conscious. If they want to get certified to a standard, if they should get it to the new standard requirements of 45,000 ISO 45,001. But whereas the quality standard, the environmental standard got realized very long time back, about 2-3 decades since now, of course, close to 2.5 decades since. But the OSHA standard has recently come. At last, the vision got realized. And why does it so? That's not our point of discussion now, because there are a lot of disagreement between various team of technical committees, and as a result of which, thankfully, we have got a standard now. And these many countries were involved in development of this standard. You can see the entire green patch one are the participating members, and the yellow ones are the observers for this standard which have to come through. Of course, we had seen about the benefits a few while back, like a few minutes back, we saw about the overview of the requirements. But nevertheless, we'll just look for what is that structured approaches. And in the beginning, I was telling that we need to have a structured approach. And towards the structured approach, I did mention about the word plan, do, check, act as far as the management system is concerned. So the plan part of the standard, it talks about the context that under the context of the organization, what it is for, to whom they are accountable for, who are the major stakeholders of the organization, the expectations of the stakeholders, and what are the external and internal issues against which they need to perform. All these things would determine the context of the organization, and leadership and the worker participation, which is a core element of this standard. Is like I will talk about with quite a few examples of it also. And of course, the planning, and then the do part is support and its operation, and the check is the performance evaluation, measurement, monitoring, internal audits, and all those things. And act, of course, is for the improvement. The benefits are I've got a structured framework, like in the sense I've started with, I know I've not missed any of the hazards in my organization. That gives a very structured feeling. I know the process flow of my activities. I've identified in every processes the associated hazards, and I've already ranked it, and I have given the pool the resources towards the risk which I have classified as major or catastrophic. So it gives a structured framework approach. It enables the people to engage themselves. That's the employee engagement becomes a very core area. And of course, the easier alignment to the standard it is. Of course, it gives rise to a good supply chain requirements. What is called as supply chain requirements? Like, in fact, to say this pandemic time, for that matter, because of this various supply chains were affected, the organization's production got standstill also for that sake. And a classic example which I could give is with respect to the semiconductors. The semiconductor division, what you call, was in a very bad, what you call, that had taken its toll. Their supply was so bad due to this pandemic situation, as a result of which all the automotive suppliers, automotive clients or the customers had a great suffering. And the demand was very high because of the remote working. The PC manufacturers, without a silicon wafer, they had suffered to a very great extent also. And in this, if Toyota, if people from Toyota have joined, they can proudly say that they had mitigated this situation. Especially Toyota was the only automotive company which did not face this crisis as far as this semiconductors part of it crisis, because they had a good tie with the Micron controller unit suppliers, and they were doing it, and they were what do you call it, and it was, the mitigation measure was good, but it never lasted long. In the year 2021, this year, I mean to say the year which has gone past, in the March, end of March, Renaissance, if I remember, Renaissance is the name of a semiconductor supplier. They underwent a huge fire. A fire event had occurred, and as a result of which Toyota had to suffer close to 25% of the new car registration got a suffering, actually, because of the semiconductors, or small semiconductors are not available. Any gasoline cars, if I remember right, will be having about 50 to 150 semiconductors got. They'll be having it in terms of its safety, in terms of its communication, all those things, like, and fuel management system. All these things requires a semiconductor part of it, and that's what is required. Maybe 150 to 150 small numbers of semiconductors they need to have. Whereas the electric car requires 3,000 numbers, and you know how the electric car, the startup of electric car will be having a suffering. I leave it to your imagination to talk about also. And this Renaissance electronics, which I was talking about, is somewhere in some of my, Toyota colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong. Hitachi Noka is the name of the place where at Japan, where they underwent this thing. So supply chain, even now, if you walk inside many organizations, they say our demand is very good. We are not able to, the logistics is having a support because the containers we do not have. So the supply chain requirements are the ones which would hamper, and that the benefit of OHSMS has got a role to play, that you need have to, if things are in place, then the efficiency will be very good. See, I request at this point in time, if I'm taking more time, someone can prompt me that I'm taking much time, so that I can logically look into it also, Rupa or Mr. Prakash, for that sake.
Yes, sir, we will do it, sir.
That's right. The annexure SL is the one which I was talking about. It's it gives you overall structure of the recall how you go about a management system for occupational health and safety would be like. So it starts with the scope, context of the organization, leadership, planning and support, operation, the performance evaluation. Why this has been devised is the annexure SL been so devised for a reason that any of the standards can be dovetailed into it, be it an occupational health and safety, or be it a food safety management, or be it a, environmental management systems, or for the sake quality management system can be dovetailed. That's what is the importance of this Annex Excel, and they need not have to follow through the same numbers as been specified in these standards. Then they need not have to. So we look into the external and the internal issues in what would impact the organization, the business outcomes. That's what is the one which I would like to emphasize on. The internal factors of an organization that may take a beating could be, maybe its local internal information systems takes a beating, could be a corporate culture, maybe an internal issue, could be the working conditions, can be an internal issue, could be, as I was mentioning it, you unsafe conditions or whatsoever it is. Process and products and services could be another internal issue, because of the changeover of my products, my changeover of process do happen very quite often, as a result of which there could be a incidents of injury or ill health can happen about it. it. Of course, policy and strategy are the driving factors for any organization, and outsourced activities could be another one which you can think about. The governance structure also. All these factors are internal factors which would impact an organization business processes. Whereas the external factors could be like your competitors, how they are performing also could be an external factor, could be a supply chain. We talked about an example of a supply chain a few minutes back. Socioeconomic conditions is an external factor. The technology, changes in technology, the new market forces or the new knowledge are the ones which are the external factors which would determine or which may create an impact as far as the occupational health and safety management system is concerned, that you need out to focus on and then work about. Of course, the context are these are the interested parties to which you are accountable for, could be in form of customers, regulators, contractors, visitors, could be your neighbors, could be investors, workers. All these people are very much interested on your performance, about the way in which you create a bottom line, the margins, and what is the share for them also, and how the top line with respect to the market share, and how that market share goes also, all these things. But all this would take a beating if there has been an incident of health and safety issues which do arise, or if that, as I was mentioning some time back, the turnover of employee per person, if they take a beating, then the rest of all have cascading effects on the business performance also. This is a very important topic which I would like to deal with for a while, in the sense people talk about worker. Worker encompasses everyone, gentlemen, like ladies and gentlemen, like it involves everyone. You need to take even a person who's working full time, who's working partially, for that matter, as a part time, or a contract labor who's walking in, or your supplier walking in and walking out of your premises, or the trainees for that matter, or the people who have come for the induction training for a while also for that sake. All these things are encompassed, or are the definition of a workers that has been given. So you are liable and you are responsible and accountable for taking care of their safety and their well-being. So that is what is the workers representatives. And he talks about participation and consultation, though this English word is something may mean something similar, or but they are not the same. Like participation is, you have to demonstrate that you have involved everyone in their process in identification of hazards in decision making. That's why I was saying you how to demonstrate it. It's not a team of people sitting in the drawing board and then writing, oh, it is a fettling process, oh, it is in the kitchen operations and the food industry in the kitchen, oh, these are the likely hazards. They cannot do that. They have to go engage the people who are there hands on, who are working there, and involve them, make them participate in identifying the hazards. And when they identify the hazards, they will see to it that none of the hazards is missed, and you'll be able to evaluate to a good extent to meet your own criteria about my loss of time due to incidents and accidents is minimized or even nullified also for that matter. So the participation is very much essential, and consultation, seeking views before making a decision. I'm going to change. This is the change management. I'm going to install a new process. I'm going to install a new machinery. I'm going to change the existing process. When you're doing it, that you need to have a consultation with them. Participation can be demonstrated in various ways. That is one I told you, as identification. And the second one, which I could remember, is by safety committee meetings. In all the safety committee meeting, which is again an important requirement as far as the Factories Act is concerned, that yes, look here, I've involved the contract laborers. Representation from the contract laborers are there, and they have been participating, and that's what it is, and their inputs been taken into account. So participation in that way of safety committee meetings. The third one, the safety, I mean, the participation can be demonstrated as the incident investigation part of it. When an incident or a accident has happened, for that matter, how you have involved all the people associated with that process, and if a corrective and preventive actions are taken, and is it watertight, will it not reoccur. That way, what are the changes in the working level documents, what are the changes in the process planning documents which you have done, and how you educated the people. So all these things would demonstrate the extent of participation of the people. Of course, consultation, I was mentioning it to you about how it is. Of course, I got a very good example about a few months back only. Again, I was in an organization where they were telling that this is the coolant oil which they are using it for, which they have been using it. So I want to be environmental friendly. I'm changing this coolant oil, a huge machining organization. So instead of changing the coolant oil every third day, there is one new coolant oil has come that it can go stretch up to 15 to 20 days also can be made use of. They they implemented it in the mid of a week, and on the next Monday, they could see many operators coming back to their line managers with skin rashes and with eyes swollen or whatsoever it is. And there was a huge commotion. When I was walking through that point in time and asked, what is that? And later I found that the organization has changed the coolant oil without consulting the team of people, and as a result of which they looked at the environmental way of that it can extend its life for the sake of not disposing it off as quick as possible, that it extends maybe twice in a month instead of 4 times in a month. They have found out, but they have forgotten that it need have to be consulted with the team, and that need have to be oxygenated, like that I mean to say that it has to be circulated continuously also when it is in the idle condition, so that the required oxygen, dissolved oxygen level what we call is being maintained there, as a result of which there will be no microbes. In this case, an anaerobic condition had set in because it has not been under circulation in the weekend period of a Sundays and Saturday late in the evening to Sunday and the early Monday morning. So as a result of which the anaerobic condition, the pathogens or the microbial load which has got crept inside the liquid has resulted in this type of a one. As a result of which the organization lost about a days of a production, maybe close to 2 shifts of a production they lost in convincing, consoling, and later to which streamlining the system of it. So consultation plays a role, be it a modification or a new machine instruction, whatever it is, like it plays a very dominant role that need to be taken into account. Implementation, of course, you'll have always have a situation where to start, where I need have to start. I've understood the knowledge, but where need have to start in the sense, then you have to look at the context, look at what you want from the system, review the existing system, analyze, do a gap analysis of this from here, I want to move to here, what is that? And then implement the plan, involve the workers in the process, and of course avoid excess documentation, because the people will get bored saying that again there's an amount of a documentation. It may not have to be, because after all, health and safety has got no holidays, it has got no tolerance for that sake, and you need have to uh, carry it in a way that can be very user friendly even. Of course, the comparisons with the standard, which I could say, of course, there are a few changes, which I'll quickly rush through. What are those changes is, of course, ensure policy and objectives are compatible with the strategic direction of the organization. I told you some time back, I'm going to bring in to ramp up the production capacity. Yes, you ramp up the production capacity, but it's to be a strategic in a way that it should be oriented towards the employee ill health and well-being need have to be taken care. I know an organization which has expanded its kitchen, but without having an emergency door also for that matter, without looking at the adequate fire safety equipments there for that matter. So whenever you do such expansions, whenever you do changes which you bring in, that's the reason the second one it talks about any business process should always keep in mind the occupational health and safety management system for that matter before you make any business processes. That should be aligned. So the alignment of the business needs and the occupational health and safety need to be one and the same. It cannot be seen as two different ways. As I was mentioning, it has got no tolerance also. So develop, lead and promote the organization OHS culture, and be accountable for the effectiveness of the occupational health and safety to achieve the intended results. The intended results are you maintain your brand image. What else you can expect actually, like to maintain your brand image, of course, the turnover per employee per day also increases. Your loss of time due to incidents and accidents reduces. Motivation, the people get motivated. A person who is in DuPont for that matter, I'm just taking DuPont for the sake, of course, I should not be quoting any name in this public domain, but that is the motivation. They say, like, I'm from this organization, and then they speak about themselves also for that matter. And similarly, the organization where I represent, Lloyd's LRQA for that matter, our policy, which was devised about several decades back, we talk about we care for the people at land, sea, and air. That's what we talk about it also. So that has gone very deeply into my thought process also for the last 22 years. And I've been in this field is because of that policy, which has been driven very deep into the minds. Of course, the last one is like the management should protect workers from reprisals. That's very, very important, that the person, when they bring about an accident or incident, they should be well taken and they should attend on to it. So specific hierarchy of controls, I showed it you like elimination, substitution. Those are the hierarchy of controls, which we saw with an example also. And specific section of management change, like I was telling about how a coolant oil change, whatever the management of change is very important that need to be taken care. Of course, procurement and contractors, outsourcing also you have got a major role to play, because you cannot wish it away that I've given it to a subcontractor working in premises, because the people, for that matter, a classic example is in the Bangalore region. I do not know, I don't want to mention the name of the organization. It's the software industry. About 20 years back, if or 19 years back or 18 years back, I don't remember right. I mean, it was like this. It was the magazines, all the daily magazines read about 28 people died in that famous software organization. It was, and it was there, all the papers got published, and the people were very much looking at how can this happen. And when they read the third paragraph, blah blah blah, XSS company, known for this, whatever it is, about 25 people got injured, and 14 people died, or whatsoever it is. And the third paragraph, it reads that such and such developers who were working on a civil work inside their factory, and when they were removing their the ceiling support, as a result of which the ceiling part of it, which the construction which was going halfway through, caved in, and the people died. And they are nothing to do with that organization of that software industry is. But what does the magazine carried about, or the public domain, what the information carried about? Such and such people, what do you call, from this organization, this organization, these many people died. So outsourcing of an activity, any contractors, what you're doing. A classic example is again Ola. If a Ola driver misbehaves with another gender, for that sake, if the Ola is in the public domain, he cannot wish it away. The Ola cannot say, he's not my driver. We have not recruited him. You never know about him. They cannot shy it away. So it's very important as far as your brand image is concerned, that need have to be taken in the right perspective and to be seen. Of course, these are the important requirements, like from the previous specifications what we had seen, to consider the workers at a location not under their direct control. You have to take a responsibility, and those who are working the vicinity of the organization also need to take into account. And the relevant audit results need to be shared with the workers. That's the most important requirement. You cannot keep the occupational health and safety audit and keep it to close to your chest. It should be made known to the workers also. And of course, the management review, the specific requirements to be considered about its trend in performance. Of course, this is the last slide I've got to say. To adopt a joint approach, conducting an incident investigation. It should be investigated in a timely manner. Yeah, and to be very open and honest, you don't try because of this reason only this incident has happened. You should be very open and honest enough to declare it. Avoid a blame. It is because of that it has happened. And of course, investigate the root cause. Key steps in investigation process being information gathering is very important. Analysis to its depth is also very vital. Risk control measures which you have to bring about. And of course, you have to take an action plan for implementation. You have to be there. Why? Because if we can understand the cause, we can prevent. If you do not know the cause, we never know, like from how you can prevent its reoccurrence. Especially this slide, the last one. I mean, sorry, I just told this the last, but this is the last, in fact. For the people who are looking at the turtle diagram, or they are automotive industry, they are very familiar with the turtle diagram approach of who the people and what is the inputs, what is the output, and methods and measures and all. I would talk about this. Would talk about in one single slide. You can think that what is the people should be competent, skill, knowledge levels, of course, training and aptitude need to be there, and the inputs are the occupational health and safety hazards and its evaluation. Their objectives need to be derived from it. And of course, the legal requirements need to be considered. And the output is the finished goods or services. And the results of, and one of the most primary result is you have a unharmed workforce and motivated workforce in place. Of course, the measures are nothing but the objectives, whether what you have defined has been accurate. The performance trends, what you intended and what you have achieved, are the trends are good enough, and how fast you implemented the corrective action. I stop here, gentlemen. I never had any, I did a mistake. I never had a time clock or a time device that could prompt me in front of me, and I never know. I've kept my time. If you got any questions, please do ask. Uh, I'm here to take any questions.
I think there is a question from Mr. Nagaraj. Good afternoon, Mr. Venkat. Sorry, I was a little late and I could understand. Just before Nagaraj, I can ask, I think I have one question.
Please.
The OSHMS was not a, it's an optional, which I could understand earlier for any organization. Now, like in a case of a ISO 14,000, most of the companies are like almost compelled to get into the environmental certifications and all that because of there's a lot of focus on the sustainable manufacturing and all that. So will it this ISO 14,000, I mean 45,001, become a similar compulsion to all the industries by any legal requirements or regulatory requirements?
Yeah, see, any ISO standard for that matter, to answer your question in first place, is not a compulsion. It is they need how to take that into account instead of following. I mean, I'm using a word cautiously, a haphazard approach towards occupational health and safety. They can lean on a standard. They can lean on certain what do you call a structured approach of whatever it is like. So ISO 45,000 comes as a good way for them to go and implement it. So previously it was as a specification, as you rightly mentioned. There is not a, called a standard. Now they've got a standard which has gotten a wide acceptance in every countries for that sake. Across all the globally, it can have recognition for that sake. And if you just look into it, in a way, if you are an exporter or if you are doing some other activities, I mean, for that matter, I never want to mention a particular country for the sake for the sake of a discussion. They use a labor force, which is a cheap labor force, which they are underaged and other things and all. They may be floating in the public domain. But such things will not arise if you just say yourself, I'm a qualified for this, a third party has certified us, and hence the reason, and we are there, and we do produce this also for that matter. If you just say that, then your recognition level grows high. See, I'll tell one good example, if I can, if you allow me for a minute. I'm talking about 30 years back, when you were seeing cricket matches during those days. Tata Steel advertisement goes this way. If people who can recollect, they can recollect this, what I'm trying to say. It will be shown a fellow will be riding a bicycle, will be in a motorbike, people will be going, a peaceful coexistence of people and living could be seen, and they cared for people, and they also mention that we also make steel, Tata Steel. That's what they mean part of it. So whenever you remember such organization, like you think about it, yes, this what is the safety standards to which they are known for, and that's what their practices are against known standards. So to tell you, it is not a compulsion. The organization can compel themselves to get in for it, to be in the public domain. Yes, they are certified against a recognized standard.
Yeah, I think Nagarashana has got a question. No, go ahead, Nagarashana.
Yeah, good evening, sir. And
Good evening.
first of all, good evening, Prakash-san, and thanks for my management to give an opportunity for me to participate in this session. Guru-san, Guru-sir, good evening. I have two questions with respect to ISO 45,001. My first question is goes like this: how to make external interested parties risk accountable and manage? I understand interested parties risk can be managed, but when it comes to external interested parties, there's various factors which may influence, which is out of our control sometimes as well. So how to bridge that within
Yes.
same management?
Say that's the reason. Hats off to the fellows who write the standard part of it. They always use a term that you have to influence. You cannot have a control, but you have to influence. Okay, that's what it is. But it depends on if those people who are working at your premises, then you can very well influence them in much different way. I'll tell my own example. Again, I'm trying to share my experience. 20 years back, when I was walking to the Reliance Jamnagar refinery, where it was close to, I never want to mention the magnitude of the job which we need out. I have to stay there for more than 20, 25 days with a team of 10 people. Imagine the quantum of work of assessing their health and safety part of it. So when I was there, the third day or the fourth day, I could find the organization has employed or deployed close to 650 contract agencies. Please notice 650 contract agencies. That means every agency people will have a minimum of 20 people to maximum of any number it can be also for that site. When I was walking through the construction area, when I was walking through the refinery areas, every process part of it, where these contractors bring their own lifting tools and tackles, their own portable equipments for that matter. Everything, I could not find a deviation. Being certified by a competent people, could be everything. Even their PPEs and everything were wonderful. Like, they were wearing it, and then they were. I could not see any deviation. But whereas at the same time, before going there, when I was visiting some of the industries around here locally, I'm giving an Indian example only. I'm not giving any overseas examples. When I'm walking through some of the other industries, that same point in time, I heard the major stakeholders of the managing directors of the organization saying, "Hey, Venkat, this is very difficult to follow an occupational health and safety. When I'm giving a hard hat and the safety shoes for this fellow, the next day he's not to be seen. And I'm having a great problem to implement it because the agency's people are like that." So I've had that type of a mindset when I walked over there, and when I could find the what we call fifth day, sixth day, the 10th day, I could not hold myself. I wanted to just jump the process to evaluate the contract management. So I was telling I want to see the contract management team and how they are managing it. I wanted to study that. That's why I was going there. But when I was interacting with the contract management team, that guy was telling me, I still remember, it's so very fresh in my mind. Venkat, what you say is right. What the other people talk about is right, but we don't have an option, Venkat. What we did was, first we talk to them that whenever they bring in any lifting equipment, tools and tackles need to be certified. They have to have a hard hat and safety shoes, gloves, blah blah blah. We told, but they were not following it. So in our context, the contractually we have established with them, during the patrol inspection, when we do, any of our members do, and we find if any one of your member not adhering to the safety requirements, you will be fined this much amount of a rupee. So the Sama Bheda Dhanda he was telling, and that worked for us. And for that matter, those agency people have to pay through their nose for that matter for the violation what they are doing. As a result of which, we could see that what you are seeing now is out of all those efforts which we have brought in. So, but the standard says influence them. Influence could be anyway. In the case of the refinery where I was there, I could find that they influenced in a different way, which spoke well for them, or it supported them very well. Hope I answered your
Yeah.
question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And shortly, one more question. Whether ISO 45000 certification gets impacts if incident or accidents happens in midway through? If yes, then to what extent?
See, gentlemen, we are not almighty, right? Arab? I mean, we are human. We are fallible, and we have to make mistakes, and that does happen. And if we we claim that we do not make mistake, then we need not have to go to temples also for worship. So we need not to make mistakes, and the mistakes learned. What is the important? The nucleus of that is the mistake. What have been you have done, investigated. The corrective actions to prevent its recurrence is very important. So even if you have a management system certified, whatever it is, so it doesn't mean that you are safe throughout. The incidents and accidents may happen. It is similar to getting a driving license. Is it right or not? The driving license doesn't state you are an accident-free driver or an accident-prone driver. It enables you to present yourself. Uh, there's, there's a disturbance. It gives you an indication or a confidence to you internally and to others. This fellow is driving with a license on the roads. That's what it is. So incidents or accidents are bound to happen. But how you learn, unlearn things, relearn, and implement a robustic system in place, put a robustic system. That is what is the one which will enable you if you got certified.
Yeah, clear, sir. Thank you very much.
I think there are no more questions. Is Mr. Devarajan there?
Yeah, I'm in line. Yeah.
Yes,
Good
sir. I
afternoon.
think, please,
Good
sir.
afternoon.
Please.
I was listening to it. Yes. I think thank you very much, Venkat, for a very, very detailed analysis on, especially on the safety portion of it. See, what I understand in all our areas are safety is everyone's responsibility.
Yes.
It has to start from top, and but if everyone's responsibility, no one takes responsibility of it. Hence, the systematic way of what you're mentioning of ISO 14001 becomes a necessity. See, we were talking about being in business. Applying systematic way in being business will be much more better than being in business at all. So it's what you mentioned in all the accidents, the way of actions taken, the way of it all stems back on the behavior of us. There are two things which I found in many of the applications, Venkat, it is both skill and will. We may have an excellent skill, but if you're not able to deliver with the willingness of behavior, it becomes zero. It's 0 or 1.
Absolutely.
So whatever skill you have in multiplied by will, and it is not. So hence it's important to take that systematic way of. I think you have mentioned very clearly the approach plan and the way it has to be mentioned. See, one more thing which is happening in all the industries is, or all the places is, we should take end to end, from supplier, the tier 1, tier 2, our own this thing, and to the dealer if in automobile, any other industry. So what happens is, as an OEM, we should be responsible for the safety standards of our tier 2. Then the pull happens.
Absolutely.
Otherwise,
I do
it
agree.
becomes, we'll be talking that, oh, you have to take safety, you have to take safety. It doesn't matter this thing at all. The third thing which I learned from your talk today, which is very good, is we have to build the safety practices first. We have to build a factory which is safer. Then we can push the operator to say, yeah, you need to work this way, rather than saying, operator, you're not working better. And we should walk the talk. So I think since we have got a lot of team members today from the MSMEs and other areas, see, in all these practices, we should walk the talk. We should show that, yeah, if there's a paper falling down, we should pick and place, and then safety, electrical connections, we should use plug properly for the connection, not the wire, which people, if you're observing it, when you're walking down, stop it. Tell that member that it has to be, see, it all becomes, I strongly feel, especially in TVS, we strongly believe in systematic way of behavior, which makes the system work. I think, and one more thing which is important, Prakash, and all the other members are, the new technology coming into place, EV coming into place, new technology of light, many things are coming into place. So it is always better to have the hazard methodology, make the analysis properly before any changes, before any implementation. And that's the way I look at it. It's a very, very important part. It is not whether it is regulated by the government or whether it's regulated by the system. It should be a self-driven safety from all the areas, from the supplier, from our OEMs to the dealer. I think it is a very interesting talk, Venkat. I think thank you very much. And I think we can have further discussions. Toyota has a very systematic way of safety methodology. TVS has got methodology. I think all these things are, ISO is definitely a way in which 45,000 shows, and we are all very much particular, and we are all certified under ISO 45,001. We are also mentioning to our suppliers that they should work, and we are trying to say how we can sponsor that particular activity supplier, because if there is any regulation coming from the government, it can say, OEM, you're responsible for any accident happening in the supplier end. If that type of regulation comes, it becomes a regulation.
That's
but
true.
before that, it becomes our own way of best practices taken to the supplier end. I think, thank you very much. And it was a very, very interesting talk. I had to join a little bit late, sorry for that, but it's a very interesting talk. But safety is always in our hearts. And our first customer is an operator, and his safety is the most key for all of us. Thank you very much, Venkat.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
for participating in this. And on behalf of BCIC, we are very, very happy, and thank you for this, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Prakash, over to you, Rupa.
Over to Rupa.
Thank you very much, sir. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to play a small thank you video, sir. Please stay with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Venkat,
Thank
once
you.
again.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you once
Thank you
again.
all. Bye. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.